Hi, welcome to Wellness Wisdom. I am Sharon Whitefawn, the founder of Whitefawn Wellness, and I have with me today Rose Fluharty. Hi, Rose. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
This is exciting. Rose and I have a lot in common in terms of nutrition and health education, and this is just really exciting for us to have this conversation together. So if it's okay with you, Rose, I'm going to read your bio and then we'll get into the meat of it all.
Sounds good.
Okay, cool. You have a great bio. Rose Fluharty is a certified nutrition specialist credentialed by the American Nutrition Association through its board for certification of nutrition specialists. Rose holds a graduate degree in clinical nutrition from the National University of Natural Medicine in Portland, Oregon. It is the oldest accredited naturopathic medical school in all of North America. She previously received her degree from Portland State University in public health and focusing on community health education and working with inner city youth. Much of her knowledge and her experience comes from working closely with real people, relationships, work environments, travel, and all of the hard stuff that's been life's biggest learning opportunities. While Rose is grateful to have had the privilege to spend in higher education, there are deep stories to learn from every day listening and reading. So you continue your education today, and that's really important, especially in the nutrition world. I find everything is changing so quickly and we're learning more and more, and it's really fascinating, actually. Rose was born in Mariposa County, and she enjoys claiming that she was born in a barn in Cathy's Valley. Growing up in Mariposa allowed a unique opportunity to experience rural life before traveling to different parts of the world. In a full circle, she has returned back to Mariposa to start her own clinical nutrition practice here in 2021. And she lives on 1 acre with her partner and 2 dogs, enjoying the country life. Whew, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So full circle, I love that, coming back to where you began. And so on that topic of where you began, how did you begin your journey into nutrition? Like, was that something that was always in you from the very, very beginning? You just was always drawn to food? I'm really curious what led you into clinical nutrition as a profession.
Good question. And thank you for reading that bio, Sharon. It's wonderful to be here. I love food, and I think that it started with eating or perhaps the struggle with eating, which was sort of a thing as a young person for me. I liked cooking, I enjoyed gardening, but I struggled with what worked for my body, particularly up until adulthood. It was just kind of a lot of nutritional questions there. And I had some really wonderful medical support throughout my life. Learned a lot from different doctors that helped me, but I knew that there was more to know about food. Like there was some kind of secret underlying information that just needed more focus. And so the idea of nutrition popped up. I had no concept of this being a job or a career until the last 5 or 10 years. I thought it was an interest or just a focus for myself, but I don't even know if I knew that there were nutritionists in the world up until maybe the last decade. So it was a big experience, even recognizing that this is something I could be or do for the world. So coming to that recognition took some time on its own. So that's kind of a big answer to a really important question.
Yeah. So I'm interested, something you said makes me wonder, did you have some type of an illness or something that you struggled with that nutrition helped you to heal?
Yes and no. I do think that working around some allergies and intolerances, like some gut issues as a kid, was kind of the finite stuff that we were looking at, in terms of lab results and learning about physiology. That was what the medical world wanted to focus on. It took a lot longer for me to look into the emotional side of things and the kind of interconnection between psychosocial, emotional health. That came much later, but it definitely started with an allergy, which I thought was going to ruin my life. Finding out that I had an allergic, a wheat allergy. I was 12 or 13, thought life was over at that point. Like I couldn't eat anymore. And it led me to just look at what else was in the world. And there's lots and lots and lots of different types of food. But up until that point, I just thought, that's everything I eat. So what do I do now? And it forced me into, okay, go to the health food store, look on the shelves, listen to my mother. There's a lot of difference out there. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And I love that component of the emotionality with food, because I think that I see it, I experience it myself, but in our world, there's just so much emotionality around food and so many triggers and so many like cultural or familial type things that we're exposed to that's like normal or natural for our family, or this is just how I do it, but not paying attention to the bigger picture, just to eat a slice of bread or put butter on it. Just like, well, this is just what we do. And comfort food and all of that that's tied into our diet. And it has to be quick because we're too busy. And, I'm stressed out, so I'm going to eat this thing and it's going to make me feel better, but it doesn't really make you feel better and ultimately could make us sick, that type of thing. So, yeah, what did you learn? I don't know how to make this into a question, but, you mentioned the emotional component to eating. And so what is it that you see either in your life or in your clinical practice with clients?
So much inflammation, and I think that clinically, that's what we see a lot of this turns out to look like in labs or on a biological level. We see that inflammation just pushes us towards multiple levels of chronic disease risk. And over time, even something as simple as an allergy could really inflame you to a point of being at risk for other comorbidities. So and time dealing with these things at a younger age and starting to reduce that inflammation has been really important, I think, to avoid some other situations that could have come up. So, to be frank, a lot of it is based on our level of inflammation that I think we're experiencing, not only from our dietary intake, but from our environment that we're living in and the toxins that we're all experiencing, which is variable depending on where you live, and it depends on your zip code. But those of us that have moved around in life also still carry those impacts with us, and not only in our own lifetime, but in our previous generations' lifetime. So it's huge. And I do think this is a multi-leveled conversation that involves some intersectionality, but what it looks like now in the modern day, I think we're seeing inflammation overload. And how do we address that with diet? Yay, really delicious food, So that's the part about nutrition, is that it's tasty. And when we start to talk about anti-inflammation and all of these big concepts, it often looks like something like berries or something very, very attractive. So I do find that nutrition can be a really positive part of healthcare and wellness, because it's actionable. It's like, what tomorrow? What are you going to eat tonight? What can I do right now?
Yeah.
That's a relief. So
Yeah, right. It's like we're empowered because it's something we can do ourselves. I wake up thinking about sometimes I go to sleep thinking about what am I going to make tomorrow? What veggies do I have in the refrigerator and how can I blend this with that? And what flavor do I want? And, I just I get excited. Food excites me. I made a salad before we got started and I'm slicing, I like how you said it's in the berry, like just a simple, plain, bright red berry or, and so when I prepare my food, like I just connect with that. So I was slicing the veggies for my salad today and I'm looking at these carrots that I got from Raw Roots. It's our local organic farm here in Mariposa. And I'm slicing and I'm like, oh my gosh, you are so beautiful. Like I'm just like talking to it lovingly. And I want to, bring up that topic too with our food is the energy that we give it and the energy, it's a reciprocal, right? Like I'm loving on this carrot when I was slicing. Oh my God, you should see. And these potatoes, these purple potatoes, just vibrant. So anyway, I'm slicing all of this stuff up and I'm talking to it beautifully. And I'm just getting their energy before I ever even eat it. I feel like I'm getting the healing energy from these foods. And at the same time, blessing our farmers and blessing the earth and being grateful for that. So then that reciprocation. So later, when we're done our interview, I'm going to eat that salad and I get to take all of that in, right? Like that energy that doesn't get talked about in food with our foods.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
What is it about Raw Roots carrots? There's something about that particular farm's carrots. They're the best thing I've ever eaten. I don't understand.
I think it's just the love of their energy that they put into their farming. They're clearly passionate about what they're doing and just all of their food is just, but yeah, the carrots often I'll juice them, greens and all. Like I buy them with all that green stuff, just put all that right through the juicer. Or if I don't juice it, I'm slicing those greens and putting it in my salad. They just do an amazing job. So shout out to Raw Roots for sure.
Yes, agreed.
And they're raising kids that on the farm and they're just healthy every level for sure.
And that's just the picture, how do we support them? How do we how do we help those types of folks thrive in our community? What do they need? And I think when we talk about root vegetables in particular are so yummy. But considering the area that we live in that's experienced so much soil degradation, mining, coal, all of the different things that have been done in this region of the Central Sierras, I do think that working particularly with the soil and regenerating our soil and like you're appreciating these vegetables that have spent time underground, these are levels that we're working to heal the underground. We're somewhat rematriating ourselves on this land by protecting our soils and regenerating that part of our earth. I think that's very particularly, I feel very particularly strong about that in this area because there's been so much done to our earth here, our literal soil.
Yeah.
Because gold mining area or whatever we call it, whatever happened 100 years ago. I think we're still in recovery from that very modern soil impact. And so when I see farmers or I see people that are appreciating and regenerating the soil with pollinators or with different plants and herbs and everything that is being done, I think that's part of our ecosystem coming back to life, and particularly from underneath. And I know that sounds very long term, like that's going to take forever for us to recover from that amount of impact, but look what they're doing, for example, regenerating their soil,
Yeah,
that's
obviously doable.
yes.
Yeah. So yeah. And that's really, can contrast that, the potatoes that we get locally here from organic farming or anywhere in the region or the world, really, there's organic farming happening and that's wonderful and blessings to all of those farmers who do that. Contrast that with the dried potatoes that you get in a box in a package on a grocery store shelf, right? So what nutritionally from your knowledge base, what can you tell the people, who are listening today, about the value or not value of, comparing those two?
Well, I think this is all based on, socioeconomic circumstances. People have different levels of food access. Some people will always have a certain trajectory when it comes to the access to food that they have, which is where we're at in the world. That's our challenge, I think, as far as like how to make this accessible and affordable in all of this beautiful regenerative farming and progress that we're making, that we're talking about right now. How do we make that accessible to everybody, right? Because a lot of the folks that are ending up eating the types of foods that you're contrasting with, say, this beautiful fresh potato, don't necessarily want to be eating that way. And so I think that there are a lot of people that are in positions, either financially or just because of their economic circumstances, that their body is used to eating processed and easy to find food, basically survival mode.
Sure.
A lot of that involves preservatives. And so not only the processing is happening in order for these foods to become more accessible to at a cheaper price, basically, then they're adding preservatives so that they last longer. So it's, again, I think that goes back to somebody wanted to make potatoes more shelf stable and they got ruined, and so now we think that potatoes are unhealthy when really the original form of it is a beautiful vitamin C rich potassium fiber that I would recommend most people to eat.
Yeah.
But which one do you have time to make? Where do you get it?
Right.
All of I think it's hard to talk about when we talk about processed foods and junk foods and all of these kind of quote. I mean, it's what people have access to. I do believe that we are lucky to live in an area where we have so much access to growing our own foods.
Mhm.
But for the most part, I think people are either trying to make food last longer or stay on their shelf, make it affordable, And so, of course, things like garlic lose a lot of their antioxidant qualities when they're put into that form, and we're like, dang it, such a beautiful food. But people got to eat, And so I think there's just this really huge level of injustice when it comes to people not being able to access these fresh foods. So,
Very
seeds,
true.
right? Seeds are inexpensive, but we got to protect them. We need to teach people how to do this on their own and bring this back to a sustainable level so people can do this in their own home. It's simple to cook. We know that there's a way that we can improve food access just by giving people basic health education skills.
Hmm.
That should be free. That's the issue.
Yeah.
That's not taught in school. That's an issue. And so God love the master gardeners and the other people that are devoting their time, in our community, Sharon. People just need the education. I really do believe that there's a lot of want for that learning out there. It's just
Yeah. That's such a great point, Rose. Really true. I grew up in poverty. My mother was a single mom with 6 kids in Philadelphia inner city. I mean, we grew up on, it was called no frills boxes of mac and cheese. It wasn't even Kraft. It was called no, literally, it said no frills. It was a black and white box. And I think it was 6 or 8 for $1 that we bought with our food stamps, and hot dogs, boiled hot dogs. This is basically what I grew up on. And I didn't like it. I won't eat mac and cheese now, nor a hot dog. Yeah, so I think, partly for me, my drive to, it was just, I couldn't eat another thing in a box. And I mean, not that I didn't eat processed foods after that, don't get me wrong, but the more I learned, like you said, that education, right? So learning to take something that was in a box that's processed and then adding some chopped up spinach, adding a little something so I can get a nutrient in there somehow. And still, I mean, I'm blessed now, but I was not for a very long time. And so learning, it's funny, at the health food store, I just only buy things on sale. I buy things on the clearance rack. I mean, like, there are ways to do it economically, and it's still expensive. And food right now is just ridiculously expensive everywhere you go, especially in California, where it's mostly grown, and it's mind-boggling to me. But don't get me started down that rabbit hole. So when we're on a budget, one of the ways that I've discovered was, okay, so I like spinach. So I would buy fresh spinach and then I would chop it up and add it to the processed thing. Or buy, certain fresh foods that I like and figure out how to incorporate it in with the less expensive thing in the box on the shelf with the longer shelf life.
Yes. Yes. I love that. Yes. A frozen pizza. Canned tuna. There's things that there's foods in the middle of the aisles that we can definitely work with, right? We want all the fresh foods, but it's also about like how long it's going to last for you too. So I love pestos and I love hummus and things like that, where then you get this olive oil base and it lasts for a week, And so rather than, okay, we're going to start eating all of these greens, for example, is this one health impact that we know is primarily useful for almost everybody. Um, but then they go bad 2 days later and you're like, oh my gosh, I spent $18 on these beautiful greens and I have to eat them instantly. So just learning how to, that's a preservative that's effective, and healthy. And so teaching people to make pestos and things that'll just condense all of those foods into one thing. It's a tactic, right? But it's the same concept as how do we make these foods a little bit more affordable and accessible and dense.
Yeah.
But I love your what you were saying about what can we mix in? What can we add to the thing? How can we make foods last a little bit longer? We don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I think that's where people can get really stuck with foods too. It's like, oh my gosh, okay. If you can figure out one thing that works for you and eat that several times a week, that's okay. That's allowed. That's not cheating, And so not having to come up with something new constantly, it's okay. And I think that can be a little bit of a relief sometimes too when we're figuring things out. So how do you feel living in California? I have a question for you.
Okay.
How do you feel living in California? And I know you've been here for a long time, but still with your family on the East Coast. And of course, that's how I refer to Pennsylvania. I don't know if that's how.
It is, for sure. One state from the ocean.
So to us Californians, we just have no idea what it's really like out there to eat sometimes. And I do feel like I want to admit, I've spent a lot of time on the West Coast, like of the United States, and that is a really different food story.
It is. It really is. And that's a great question. So it's interesting because I am very much into food and love buying local, and I love raw foods. I just happen to love raw fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds. It's just that's what I'm drawn to. But I do notice when I travel back and forth, because my family is back east, that I eat differently. I don't eat as healthy when I'm back east, which seems really strange. But I have a great kitchen here, and I have a great resource for fresh, healthy foods here, and I forage the land here. There's everybody's spraying, weed poisoning on their lawns. Like it's just there's toxicity in the atmosphere. It's just it's really, from my experience, very, very opposite. So when I'm there, everything is so easy. I could Uber Eats a pizza if I wanted to. There's food everywhere, and it's not the best quality food. There are some great vegan restaurants. Don't get me wrong. My daughter is vegan. I love going to her house for dinner. I'm like, can I come over for dinner? But it's that mentality. It's like a trigger maybe for me, that emotional component that we talked about earlier. When I'm here, I'm in this emotional state of mind with, everything is just like, it's just cleaner. It's just nicer. It's more open. I live on 23 acres of, filled with native plants. Right. And then there I live in a very noisy little neighborhood I can hear the guy next door sneeze, and I could hear the people upstairs flushing the toilet. Like it's just, and so there's like a different level of stress that happens there. And so maybe I do a little more like emotional eating, fast food type stuff, going to restaurants a little bit more because it's just so accessible. I can walk to, like, without exaggeration, probably a dozen restaurants I could walk to in less than 1 mile from where I live there. Not even kidding. more socialization with people, and everybody's bringing this stuff, and none of it's really, I'm not saying it's unhealthy, but just not to the level here. So yeah, geographically, even with myself, and I consider myself knowledgeable and motivated, and I do eat healthy when I'm there, don't get me wrong, but it's just, it is different. I notice a very distinct difference, East Coast to West Coast eating. We're ready to go to Italy. Well, not even getting ready. It's 6, 7 months from now, and I'm already thinking about the food I'm going to have in Italy. This is how much I'm like, fascinated or, consumed by food, just culinarily speaking. And I'm not a chef or anything like that, but I do love eating and preparing healthy foods.
It's the best. Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what I experience, East to West Coast, knowing what I know.
Yeah. Makes sense. It makes sense. And I think knowing yourself is best, when you travel, planning ahead, it's because you know your own needs. And I'm I think that's a good skill to be able to kind of go out in the world and know, like, food is my thing. I'm probably going to be planning my trip around it. Just
It's true. I was like, I wonder if they juice in Italy, like where I'm going. It's going to be some more remote areas in the northern part of the country. I'm like, are people juicing there? I love to juice. And so, yeah, it's just funny that I already think about that, but I'm very food conscious. And, but I'm really, and not strict, but I have very strong parameters for me personally, like in terms of processed food. I think just from growing up on so much processed food and, the government cheese and all that kind of stuff, like I want very much to eat clean. For the most part, I eat really clean. Raw, like I said, I don't eat past 7 p.m. I'm kind of strict about that. I like to wake up my digestive system in the morning gently with, water first. I drink a lot of water. Now I'm juicing ginger and putting juiced ginger and lemon in my water. Isn't that fun for the winter? Antiviral and cleansing and purifying. And then I'll have something to eat. Like I sort of like prepare my gut, and it's sort of ritualistic. I have a lot of ritual when I prepare my food. I'm almost always, thankful and showing gratitude and having that reciprocity. Even when I make my blender drinks, I have my hands on top of the blender while it's blending, and I'm blessing the earth and the farmers and everything that's in there. And talk about buying produce, something you said earlier, because it goes bad so quickly. And especially now at, the farm at Raw Roots where we get our produce, it's limited now because it's winter, right? We only have this much. So I'm getting as much as I can, and then I'm freezing it. I'm chopping it up and putting it in the freezer. I've even taken the beets and cut them up into little tiny squares along with the greens, freezing them so I can put them right in my blender drink. So I'll still be able to get them because, I'm buying as much as I possibly can now, because I know in 2 weeks we're not going to have anything. And then I'm stuck with the supermarket that's, they don't have the best produce. But,
you, you have been very busy in the kitchen, and I am very inspired.
I love it. I just love it. I told you, I wake up thinking about what am I going to prepare? Like that salad was on my mind, and I soaked the chickpeas, the dried chickpeas the other day. So I'm like, and then I'm grilling those to have like grilled chickpeas after I, obviously soaked them and cooked them. But now I'm grilling them, and then I'm going to throw them in my salad. And it's just fun. I just find it fun. So I know not everybody finds it fun. I understand that I am more unique that way. And so what about with the clients that you work with? People come to you for what in particular? And then maybe they're not loving to be in the kitchen, or they work a lot, or they have a family, they have all these responsibilities. I know it's not easy. I didn't do this as much when I was raising 3 kids. Don't get me wrong. Now I'm at a place in my life where like it's me and my husband and this great kitchen, and we can, thankfully accumulate quality produce.
Yes, different lifstyles for sure. And a lot of people that live in our community work outside of the community. So they're traveling 45 minutes to an hour to an hour and a half to drive down the hill to go to work.
Mm-hmm.
Kids that go to school, I think, are about on the same schedule. So I feel like they're about just as busy as these adults. So I work with youth in the same way. How early are you getting up? Are you bringing food with you? There's people that eat most of their meals in their car, or on the bus, or wherever, whatever their circumstances are. So
Understandable.
yes, and so working around that, I think, is just creating that level of food accessibility that we're talking about. What does that look like for your life versus your life versus your life? What does that look like right now? Maybe there's a goal to change lifestyle and behaviors down the road, but waiting to match your diet to that can be really dangerous too. Like, yeah, I'm going to retire in a few years. I'll just hold out until then I'll start exercising. We all know we can't do that.
Mm.
And that's an extreme example. No one's ever said that. But
But people think that there's a lot of people that when I hear that a lot. Well, when later I'll be able to do the, when my kids da 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 da, then I'll be able to da da da. It's not all that extreme, actually, Rose.
right. Okay. So what I found is that, and I'm not even sure if I'm answering the question anymore, but thing I have noticed is that I do find that most folks come to see me, seek nutritional services after thinking about it for a really long time, which, oh my gosh, that makes sense. I would too. It would be, and it's also some level of vulnerability. So for the most part, people come in and they have absolutely thought through the exact reason that they're seeking out nutrition, because it's self-led. They're not getting, I mean, some people are getting referred for particular reasons, but this is like, takes some serious need, or some huge shift has happened in life, and it often involves grief. And so what I found that is that a lot of folks experience a food shift, or feel that they need to inevitably after experiencing a loss or a change or a transition or some level of grief. um, that can involve a diagnosis, or being put on a medications. I mean, people experience grief around that. And I didn't know that that would suit who I am in working with people so closely. That has become something that I love the most, is that we actually get quite vulnerable when it comes to those levels of appointments of like, what is this reason for your food change? Yes, we're going to talk about the details, and we'll talk recipes, but when did this all occur? And so everybody in the world has thought about their food intake or their nutrition, whatever they call it. But to get to a point where you're going to ask somebody for help, I think that's very brave. And I find that there's a lot of courage in the clients that come and see me, and the questions that I ask and the things that I ask them to come back to me with. It takes a lot of honesty.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't think I answered your question. I think I went off on a little bit of a tangent there, but
No, I never considered the grief component having to do with our food and our diet and our lifestyle. That's powerful. Like a little bit, I feel sad right now. Like that's
hard. It's hard.
yeah.
Yeah. A lot of tears, and then a lot of relief comes. And so we can relate this all back to like my kid story of when I found out I had a wheat allergy, and I thought I had to like stop eating or buy, I don't know, weird nutrition bars for the rest of my life.
Mm.
It was a mini grief process in my own way back then. And that was real for me. People get told there's something going on with their body, or they can't eat something anymore, or their blood vessels are, at risk. That's trauma. And so oftentimes it takes that level of acceptance of what's going on in their body to actually tell me what that is. I have seen that in all ages now, throughout the life cycle. And that's how powerful food can be. So
Yeah.
when the relief comes of, oh my gosh, guess what? There might be something we can do. I mean, people just lose it. Like that's when they kind of just let go, and they're like, I had no idea that there was something I can do with food. It's a really specialized training. I understand that maybe it's just not something that people can and should throughout into their practice unless they're have the right background. But I find that often people have not been counseled around food, and that there's a huge amount of relief when we start to talk about, like, yeah, like I said, what can you do tomorrow or tonight with one ingredient? Let's start small, let's make it affordable. What do you actually like eating? Let's make it look like that. So
Yeah.
relationship piece. And gosh, and that's where I think we get to a level where it is somewhat like counseling. And so I do consider it nutritional counseling what I do. But I think balancing that with food skills, cooking, sharing a little bit of food together, it just makes it a little bit more comfy.
Wow. That's so powerful. I love that you're doing that work and that you made that connection. I mean, earlier you talked about the emotionality, and I'm just thinking, oh, I'm stressed out, like that kind of emotion, but that breathe, wow, that's really important healing work that needs to be done connected to the traumas and things like that. Yeah.
Mhm.
I remember learning about a study of obese women. This was many, many years ago. And so it was a study that took place somewhere here in California, one of the UCs. And it was women who were overweight, and they were putting them on this diet. You probably heard of this one. And then over time, they did lose the weight, but then they gained it back. And they weren't doing a lot of uh, the survey didn't include, it wasn't as in depth, right? But then after they saw this, that everybody gained their weight back, they went more deeply into surveying these people's past. And I think it might not be all, and I know it's been a long time since I read the study, had been sexually abused.
Mhm.
And the eating and the obesity was the protection, having this extra weight, right? And that's so powerful, just knowing that. It's like, wow, it's you just don't realize the layers of emotionality on every level that affect our health, on physical health, our diet, also our mental health, obviously. Eating more healthy foods, that anti-inflammatory that you're talking about, and eating for our digestive health helps that the brain as well, right? What do you know about that?
Well, I think what you're describing is this survival mode, and kind of when we talk about trauma or we talk about sexual abuse, how common that is for people to have health outcomes, particularly with the reproductive systems after that. We know there's a connection there with PCOS, for example. Almost always people have some type of traumatic history with these diagnoses. Um, but how much time do they have with their provider to really get there? We'd love to get more time with these people. We just need to spend more time talking to them. When it comes to brain health and neurotransmitters, we know that our immune system mostly lives in our gut. And so, again, like, turning this into the positive side of things, we can take our bacterial health, we can change our microbiome, we can work with our neurotransmitters when it comes to each and everybody's individual gut. We look at that through bacteria a lot now when we look at health. And so there's a lot of really exciting research around that. A lot of it involves people's fecal matter and what's being, looked at there, and how can we control our microbiome through our bacterial health. That's really where the brain gut axis connection comes into play. Um, so many foods can make an impact on that axis, and without like naming off too many, chocolate is on that list, and so I think just remembering that it's not all about kale. There are some really great foods
I call
that,
dark chocolate is my medicine. I have dark chocolate every day.
thank you.
Every day. I have a square or two or three of just really dark, no processed sugars, no chemicals. It's just, I mean, the ingredients is like four ingredients.
It's a traditional food. Yes. Yes, there's a large spectrum of healthy foods too. So just getting back to that part where we enjoy it and we have love again around food, that's that relationship piece. But yeah, I mean, bacteria, that's its own conversation. And going into that kind of health would be something I'd love to get into with you.
Yeah.
Um,
Another, I don't know, we could do it now or later. I don't know, but we could go on forever, I know. But I like how that one point you touched on it in that last comment that you were making about the individual, right?
Yeah.
Because I hear often, I mean, I'm in the health world, and I hear people say like, oh, name a vegetable or fruit, it's so good for you. Wild blueberries are good for you, or this or that, or it's good for you. I'm like, well, it might be good for you. Right? So that's the other thing I don't know that we get a lot of permission around. We get thrown all this information. Like, it used to be, they would tell me, because I loved nuts and seeds, and like, oh, you can't eat too many nuts and seeds because that's going to make you fat. And I'm just like, I've never been obese in my life, and I love nuts and seeds. And so yeah, it's like, well, maybe they make you fat, but we get this little tiny bit of information and we don't know how to assimilate it into our uniqueness, right? Our individualization. And I think that's really important to acknowledge.
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, the first time I see someone, we talk for an hour and a half. It's like a 90-minute interview.
Wow.
Then we go into recommendations. So it takes some patience there, but it does. How else are we supposed to get to know people, And yeah, we all want the magic one food to eat every day and everything will be fine. But I think that would get boring, honestly. We'd get bored. We want variety.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I love that. Oh my gosh, this is so great. I'm just curious, who inspires you, like in terms of mentors or information? How do you get your inspiration, your knowledge? I don't know, whether it's people or places or.
Absolutely. I think living in Mariposa, again, I've also been really conscientious about making sure that I'm still connecting to the greater world because we live in this really beautiful rural um, country area. And I have made some fantastic relationships with some providers here locally, you being one of them. I think it's really important to have that relationship, regional kind of just bounce ideas off of each other is huge. I still work closely with my school back in Portland. They're constantly doing research. They're constantly putting out, different conferences and things that I can connect to virtually, which has just been awesome.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't have to lose that connection, but I read all the time. I read constantly. And I think a couple of the folks that I've been following are important to mention because you can read them too. Um, Dr. Drew Ramsey is a nutritional psychiatrist, so in a different field than I am, but I have been following that person's work for 7 years, 8 years. He is working with several different doctors in Jackson, Wyoming, and to do some really deep integrative work that is breaking barriers,
Yeah,
let's say.
necessary work.
Yes, they are incredible. Heather Zwicky has been the doctor of immunology that I've been learning from for years. She has um, really been focusing on autoimmunity. And so working with her and following her research and just learning from her over the years. She's a previous professor of mine too. So just keeping up with her. The other institution that's like a non-academic um, group that I work with is the Center for Mind Body Medicine. And I did some food as medicine work with them. They work solely with trauma survivors or war torn areas. And so they'll go, they're in Gaza right now, feeding people, doing mind body work. And so I've worked with them to do mind body medicine trainings too, to work again with this kind of level of trauma that we see with food work. It's really goes hand in hand. So the Center for Mind Body Medicine has been a really wonderful group of people to aspire to. I wouldn't say I'm part of that group because they're just like heroes, but I've learned a lot from them too. And yeah, and more to come. The Institute of Functional Medicine, the American Nutrition Association, all of these kind of associations. I think nutrition is exploding, and we are learning a lot about it right now.
It's so like holistic and integrative, it used to be just fat, protein, carbs, and that's all they ever talked about. And it's just so exciting to hear that psychology piece coming into it, the blood-brain barrier stuff, our mental health, physically, how many diseases can be cured with just our diet alone?
And we spent so much time looking at genetics. We know so much about our genes, right? We thought we were trapped in them for so long. And I think that's really where the shift has become really exciting, is that yes, we all have a genetic makeup, and I do believe in DNA. I also believe that there's things that one can do within one's lifetime to work within that helix and work with your phenotypic outcomes. And so the DNA has to express itself somehow. How does it get expressed? We are in control of that.
Yeah.
That's exciting, and I think that we're
Exciting. And how empowering. Say that one more time. So empowering.
stuck in our DNA. I mean, technically, we have 100 times the amount of bacterial populations in our body than we do DNA. So really, if we're going to make changes, it's going to be in our microbiome. That can be done in one lifetime. So
Wow.
this is exciting. And I do think it's changing the way we look at medicine, to start to think about, oh, wow, fiber does play into how our next phenotypical outcome is going to be. So when the DNA expresses itself, it has to go through the process of what it's going to look like on the outside. So whether or not we're in control of how it's expressed and what it looks like.
That's
And
empowering. We are in control of that.
yes, that's something to keep in mind too, that we're learning, and so keeping up with the research, and just that's where I think that reading and really making sure that those connections are made. It takes so long for this information to get to the general public that we need to make this more accessible. Let's get it out there.
Yeah. And thank you for making that knowledge accessible to our audience here today. And hopefully they'll share some of this information and they'll take it in, because I love that we can be empowered. Like, we're often in our culture looking outside of ourselves for the answer. I've got to go take this medicine or this magic pill or this one particular food. But, understanding the bigger picture of it all, and that we can do it ourselves at the grocery store, even if we're on a budget and even if it's a little more difficult, we can take something and improve it, whether it's our DNA, our genetics, or our choices at the grocery store, right? Based on whatever we can afford.
At any age too, that's exciting.
That's really exciting. So continue. What do you know about at any age? I love this.
Well, I think that's been one of the more inspiring things. Maybe I didn't know, but okay. I was really nervous to work with clients that were older than me when I first started, which was basically everyone. And so it was a huge challenge, I'm this young person, just coming out of school. There's like this imposter syndrome.
Mm.
It's been the exact opposite. The folks that I'm working with are like, thank you so much for going through school recently. You have recent updated information. Full respect there. And then on my end, working with folks that are on all levels, but particularly the elderly population, working with the elders, I'm inspired because they're still making health changes. They're exercising, they're doing squats, it's like, I get inspired just by talking to these folks who are still trying to improve their health at all points of the life cycle. Similarly, an 11-year-old, an 18-year-old, somebody that's like, hey, I actually think I'd like to get ahead of the game. Like, thank you. Because man, what if all of us had started at that age and I got to talk to people about calcium or things like how to cook an egg? There's so much you can do at different points. And that's where I find a lot of the inspiration, is that people think of, they've been thinking, like I said earlier, they've been thinking about this for so long. Maybe I should see a nutritionist. Maybe I should talk to somebody about food. By the time they come to me, they have a lot of ideas. We just have to kind of organize it and categorize it and rename it, maybe. But the life cycle thing it's very exciting, what we can do, what we can prevent in advance, what we can do with bone mineral density, with brain health. just to name a few things, and try to
And
keep.
to reverse, we can reverse
Yeah.
things. We can reverse diabetes, we can reverse lupus, we can reverse a predisposition, if you will, to dementia. Like we can actually reverse these things with our diet, with drinking, with staying hydrated, water alone. If somebody was gonna, if I were to suggest, and I'm not a nutritionist, so you can tell me, Sharon, don't say things like that. But water, I think if everybody in the world just increased their hydration with pure, clean, healthy water, that would be a huge health improvement in and of itself. If I were going to say one thing, I would say water personally.
Mm. Huge, huge. Yep. Thanks for the reminder.
Drink up.
Not fancy. Oftentimes these things come down to these things, meaning, the big questions of what we really need to do to improve our health. It's often something that's recognizable. It's something that we can approach. It's not scary or expensive. It's water, I mean, some depends on where you are in the world, but I think that's where nutrition can kind of get a bad reputation, where it seems like you have to buy a bunch of stuff to get healthy, or to get started. No, and even when it comes to supplemental care, we know that there's some supplements and vitamins that work for folks, but that's definitely not step one. What can we do with food? All right, and then let's talk about the rest. But I think, gosh, like we can make it sound really scary and fancy to look into nutrition, but this is old. None of this is new. We've been eating since the beginning of time. These are things that I did not make up. It's just bringing it to a clinical scale.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
that's a great point. It's ancient wisdom. It's sort of like the things that your grandmother may have told you, or if you had a great grandmother in your life as a kid, it's just the stuff that they said that, over time, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. And then here we come, talk about full circle back to what the ancestors knew.
absolutely, yes, we've always been eaters. I mean, yeah, it's something that we've needed since we've always needed food to survive. And so I think that's why there is so much stress and other issues around it, because most of us have experienced something in our genetic history that has made it feel like it's been an issue in our past. It's
Right.
been scarcity, and we're still experiencing that in the world. And so I think when we look at what we can do today and what's in front of us, can we grow one seed or protect some type of food source? That's where we're headed next. And I really think when we start to talk about food and food security, it absolutely has to be a conversation that includes the climate and the environment and what's going to happen in our future. So those two things combined is like
Yeah.
sometimes an easy conversation,
Yeah, I understand. And that is, sounds like that's a top health concern for our community and for our region as well, which was a question I was going to ask, but I think you answered it without me even asking it. Rose, you are amazing. I just want to let people know that they can reach you via your website.
Yes.
Tell people how they can reach out to you if they want a session or a conversation with you.
I think the easiest way to reach out is just through my website. And really the only challenge is spelling my last name. So it's Rose Fluharty Nutrition. That's my email, rosefluhartynutrition@gmail, or you can just go to the website, which is rosefluhartynutrition.com. But folks can I think I always recommend just reaching out and scheduling a 15-minute phone call. And then we just talk on the phone if people are interested in actually being a client. That gives them a little bit of a chance to ask me some questions and let me know what it is that they're looking for in terms of support. So yeah, that's how you can get a hold of me.
That's great. I'm so happy that you're doing this work. I'm so grateful that we had this time to visit, and I could see us picking a different topic around nutrition and just taking that forever as well in the future. So hopefully we'll get a chance to do that.
Thank
About
you.
your last name, why don't you go ahead and spell it so that they can more easily find you?
Okay. So I'm Rose Fluharty. So Rose, and then I'll spell Fluharty for you. It's Fluharty. And feel free to reach out. And Sharon, I do have to say, it's been so great getting to know you this year. I can't believe that it took this long for us to meet. It feels like it's a match made a
We're
long time.
kindred spirits forever, and we're reconnecting karmically.
It seems like it's just really perfect timing. So I'm just really happy to just have you here and be getting to know you. And this was great. Thank you so much for
Thank,
inviting.
yeah, thank you so much. All right, well, I will see you in town, I'm sure. And have a great day. Stay healthy.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for visiting my YouTube channel. If you liked this video, hit the like button. If you want more like it, subscribe. Thanks. Have a great day.